In a small town in Missouri, two young boys, Ethan and Adam, lost everything when a tragic car accident claimed the lives of their parents. With no relatives to take them in, the boys were placed into foster care, left to face a world that seemed increasingly empty and cold. Then, Everett Grant, a widower living alone in a modest ranch house, saw their story in the newspaper and felt something stir inside him. Despite his own grief and loneliness, he made the bold decision to adopt them. But this wasn't going to be easy. The town, full of judgment and skepticism, wasn't ready to accept this unconventional family. From whispers at the grocery store to acts of exclusion at local businesses, the new family faced countless challenges. But what happened next was nothing short of miraculous. Stay tuned to discover how Everett, Ethan, and Adam built a new life, and how love and resilience turned their world around. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments below. Everett Grant, a widower living in the quiet town of Springfield, Missouri, had spent the last 5 years after his wife, Barbara, passed away. His life had become a series of solitary routine small projects around his home, long walks in the fields that surrounded his modest house, and endless hours to think. Everett had always been the kind of man who appreciated the peace that came with living in a small town. His home sat at the edge of a gravel road, surrounded by nature. It was a life that allowed him time to reflect, but it was also a life of quiet loneliness, the kind that could easily creep in and make him feel isolated. His wife's absence was felt deeply, yet he didn't know how to fill the void she left. One morning, everything changed when Everett stopped by his favorite diner, a place he and Barbara used to visit every Saturday for pancakes. He sipped his coffee and glanced through the local paper. An article caught his eye: "Tragic accident leaves 2 children orphaned." He read the headline again. 2 young boys, Ethan, 10, and Adam, 7, had lost their parents in a car accident on a rural road just outside of Springfield. The article mentioned that no relatives had stepped forward to take them in, and they were now in foster care. The story hit Everett like a wave, stirring something in him that he hadn't felt in years. He set the paper down and stared out the window, his thoughts wandering back to his wife's words. Barbara had always dreamed of having children, and they often discussed the possibility of adopting if they were unable to have their own. "If we can't have our own," she would say, "maybe we're meant to help someone who needs us." Those words echoed in Everett's mind as he thought about the 2 boys who had lost everything. He wasn't sure why, but in that moment, he felt a strong pull to help them. Maybe it was the deep sense of loss he had carried for so long, or maybe it was the idea that he still had the capacity to offer something of value. Regardless, Everett knew he couldn't turn away from this opportunity. 2 weeks later, Everett sat in the lawyer's office, signing the adoption papers that would change his life forever. As he put pen to paper, the lawyer, a man in his late 60s with gray hair, looked up with concern. "You know, folks around here are going to talk about this, right?" he asked. Everett paused but then replied firmly, "Let them talk." In that moment, the decision was final. He was bringing Ethan and Adam into his life, and nothing was going to stop him. For the first time in years, Everett didn't feel like he was just going through the motions of life. He had a purpose again. As he left the office with the adoption papers in hand, he felt a mixture of excitement and fear. But above all, he felt a renewed sense of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fill the void in his life by giving these 2 boys a future filled with love and care. 2 weeks after his decision, Everett found himself sitting across from his lawyer, preparing to sign the adoption papers that would change the course of his life. The office, with its aging leather chairs and stacks of paperwork, felt oddly symbolic. It was the beginning of something new, even though it was hard to predict what the future might hold. As he stared at the forms before him, the gravity of the decision settled in. He was no longer just Everett Grant, the quiet widower with a ranch-style house at the edge of town. He was about to become a father to 2 boys who had lost everything. His lawyer, a man with silver hair and a well-worn expression, glanced at him as he picked up his pen. "You sure about this, Everett?" "The townspeople, they won't understand," he said with a raised brow. Everett paused, the weight of the question pressing on him, but only for a moment. He thought of the two boys, Ethan, with his serious eyes and wary demeanor, and Adam, small and vulnerable, always looking for comfort. They needed a home. And Everett needed something to fill the emptiness that had consumed him for so long. "I'm sure," Everett replied with a sense of quiet resolve. "Let them talk. This is the right thing to do." As he signed the papers, a new chapter began. He wasn't just adopting two boys, he was opening his heart and his home to a future that felt uncertain yet full of possibility. For the first time in years, Everett felt a spark of hope. He wasn't just existing anymore, he had a purpose. The pain of his late wife's absence still lingered, but now, there was something to look forward to. Something that could perhaps heal the wounds of the past. The days that followed were a blur of preparations. Everett spent hours cleaning the spare bedroom, buying furniture, and setting up two beds, one for Ethan and one for Adam. He wasn't sure how the boys would adjust to living with him, a man they barely knew, but he was determined to make their transition as smooth as possible. As he placed a simple welcome sign on the bedroom door, he couldn't help but feel a flutter of nervous excitement. He was ready, but he also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. When the day finally came for Everett to meet Ethan and Adam, he could barely contain his anticipation. The boys were waiting for him at the children's home, a place filled with the smell of disinfectant and the low hum of other children's chatter. The moment they walked into the room, Everett's heart swelled with emotion. Ethan, the older brother, walked in first, his cautious eyes scanning the room before landing on Everett. At just 10 years old, Ethan already carried a heavy burden, as if the weight of the world rested on his small shoulders. Behind him, Adam, the younger of the two, clung tightly to Ethan's side, his face filled with uncertainty. Everett knelt down to their level, offering a warm, steady smile. "Hi, boys," he said gently, his voice calm despite the rush of emotions inside him. "I'm Everett Grant." There was a long pause as the boys sized him up, unsure of what to make of him. But as he spoke, something in their expressions softened. Ethan, after a long moment of silence, asked quietly, "Are you really going to take both of us?" Everett's heart ached at the question. He reached out, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "That's the only way this works," he replied, his voice firm yet gentle. "You and Adam come as a package deal. I'm here for both of you, and this will be your home for good." Adam's lips trembled as he looked up at Everett, his small voice barely a whisper. "For how long?" he asked, his eyes wide with fear. "For as long as you need," Everett said, the weight of his words sinking into the room. "This is your home now, and I'll be here for you, no matter what." In that moment, something shifted. Adam, who had been so hesitant, let go of Ethan's hand and stepped forward. He reached out, his small hand trembling. Everett didn't hesitate. He took Adam's hand in his, the warmth and fragility of that gesture filling him with a sense of calm. The promise he had made was no longer just words, it was real. With the adoption papers signed and the boys now in his care, Everett knew that his life had changed forever. As they left the children's home and headed back to the house, the silence between them was filled with the sound of the truck's tires crunching on the gravel road. Everett stole glances at the boys in the rearview mirror, wondering what the future held for them all. But for the first time in years, he wasn't worried. He had a family again, and together, they would navigate whatever came next. The first few weeks of Everett, Ethan, and Adam's life together were filled with both joy and struggle. The quiet rhythms of Everett's days had now been replaced by the chaos of two young boys adjusting to a new life, a new home, and a new family. Ethan, the older of the two, carried himself with a certain weight, his serious eyes betraying the quiet burdens he had already endured. Despite his reserved nature, Everett could tell that Ethan was a protector, someone who had taken on the role of looking after Adam long before they arrived at his house. But even though he was responsible and mature beyond his years, it was clear that Ethan was hiding a deep pain that he wasn't yet ready to share. Adam, on the other hand, was a bundle of energy and emotion. He bounced between moments of laughter and sudden outbursts of tears. His grief, though present, manifested in more impulsive ways. At night, Adam had trouble sleeping, his nightmares often dragging him into Everett's room in the middle of the night, trembling with fear. The first time it happened, Everett had comforted him as best as he could, his arms wrapped around the boy's small frame as Adam clung to him like a lifeline. "Is it about the accident?" Everett had asked gently, his heart breaking at the sight of Adam's distress. Adam nodded through his tears. "I miss them," he whispered, burying his face in Everett's chest. Everett, unsure of how to heal the pain, simply held him tighter. "I know you do," he murmured. "But I'm here now, Adam. You're not alone anymore." The next morning, things were quiet again. Ethan and Adam still seemed unsure about the changes in their lives, but they were both adjusting in their own ways. Ethan had started to open up a little more, though it was clear that he wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of fully trusting Everett just yet. But Everett could see the small shifts, the way Ethan seemed to relax a little more every day, how he was slowly coming to terms with the idea that maybe he didn't have to shoulder all the responsibility anymore. It wasn't just the boys who had to adjust. Everett found himself learning how to be a father, something he had never planned for. His days were filled with questions about school, helping with homework, and making sure there was enough food on the table. It wasn't always easy, especially when the neighbors began to gossip. At the local grocery store, Everett could feel the stares as he pushed a cart filled with snacks, kid-friendly cereals, and the occasional toy. At church, he noticed the congregation's whispers as Ethan and Adam walked beside him, their young faces standing out in the sea of familiar faces. The small town of Springfield, where everyone knew everyone's business, wasn't exactly welcoming of change. The whispers weren't subtle. At the hardware store, Everett had been told that they didn't have the paint he needed for the boys' room, and at the diner, the staff would often reserve every booth when he came in with the boys, leaving them with nowhere to sit. It seemed that his decision to adopt Ethan and Adam wasn't going to be without resistance. One afternoon, as the boys played basketball in the driveway, Everett overheard a comment from an older couple walking by. The man muttered something loud enough for Caleb to hear, saying, "He'll regret it." Caleb froze mid-dribble, his body tense with the weight of the words. Everett, who had been working in the garage, stepped outside. He saw the flicker of doubt in Caleb's eyes, and he knew it was time to remind the boys why they were here: to belong, to be a family. Stepping up to Caleb, Everett placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. "Don't listen to them," he said, his voice steady. "Some people talk because they don't know how to think. You're here because you belong here. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Caleb didn't say anything, but Everett could see the subtle change in his posture. He wasn't sure if the words had fully sunk in, but he could tell that Caleb was slowly starting to believe that they had a place here despite what anyone else might say. That night, as they sat around the dinner table, Everett looked at his sons and realized that even in the face of challenges, they were beginning to heal. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time, the silence in the house didn't feel quite as heavy. Adam had started to sleep through the night without coming to Everett's room, and Ethan was spending more time helping with projects around the house. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Everett knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter they would face together. As the weeks passed, Everett, Ethan, and Adam began to settle into a routine, but the weight of the challenges they faced wasn't easily forgotten. While the boys were slowly adapting to their new life, the town of Springfield still made their presence known. The whispers at the grocery store, the cold stares from some of the churchgoers, and the subtle acts of exclusion from local businesses made it clear that the community wasn't entirely ready to embrace change. Everett had expected some resistance. Small towns could be slow to accept anything that was out of the ordinary, but it was still hard to ignore. Despite these obstacles, small victories started to emerge, giving Everett hope. Ethan, with his growing confidence, began to show his talent on the basketball court. What started as a quiet, uncertain boy with a guarded heart blossomed into a focused player who quickly earned the respect of his teammates. Though some parents in the stands still gave sideways glances, it didn't take long for Ethan's skill to win them over. By halftime of his first game, even the most skeptical parents had to admit that he was good. As the game ended and Ethan walked off the court, one of the parents, a man with a skeptical expression, approached him. "You've got real talent," the man said, extending his hand. "You must be proud." Everett, who had been watching from the bleachers, stood up and shook the man's hand. "I am," he said simply. "He's worked hard." It wasn't much, but it was a step toward breaking down the walls that had been built around their family. As spring arrived, Everett found new ways to involve the boys in the community, despite the lingering doubts that some held about their place in Springfield. He signed Ethan up for basketball and Adam up for soccer, hoping that these activities would help them forge connections with their peers. At the upcoming town cleanup day, he encouraged the boys to volunteer and get involved. The event, held every year to spruce up the town, saw Everett and his sons working alongside neighbors to repaint the gazebo, clear debris, and help repair park benches. It was during this town cleanup that Everett witnessed another breakthrough. Mason, who had once been shy and withdrawn, began to open up to the other kids. His laughter filled the air as he worked alongside a group of children, helping them pick up trash around the park. A woman, who had been watching Mason, leaned over to Everett and said, "Mason's got a way of making work feel a little lighter. He's a bright kid." "That he is," Everett replied, watching his son's face light up with joy. Caleb, though more reserved, found his own way to contribute. His skills with tools and carpentry shone through when he helped fix a wobbly bench that had been leaning against the side of the park. An older man, who had seen the boys work, gave him a nod of approval. "Not bad, son," he said, offering a firm handshake. As the cleanup came to an end, Everett could see the subtle shift in the way people viewed his family. No longer were they the newcomers or the family people whispered about. They were starting to be seen as part of Springfield. They were no longer just tolerated, but accepted for the contributions they made to the community. And for the first time since they had arrived, Everett felt a deep sense of belonging, not just for himself but for his sons as well. It was a small step, but it was a significant one. The road ahead would continue to be challenging, but as Everett watched Ethan and Adam thrive in their new life, he knew they were on the right path. The whispers might never fully go away, but with each new connection, each new victory, the town of Springfield was starting to see them for what they truly were, a family, bound together by love, and determined to build a future. As summer approached, Everett, Ethan, and Adam continued to make strides toward building their new life together in Springfield. The town, once hesitant and suspicious, had slowly begun to warm up to the idea of their family. The subtle shifts in how people viewed them didn't go unnoticed. The tense atmosphere had started to fade, replaced by curiosity and, in many cases, respect. But the turning point came when a storm, the likes of which Springfield hadn't seen in years, swept through the town. The storm had been predicted, but nothing could have prepared the community for the damage it left in its wake. By the time the winds picked up and the skies darkened, Everett and the boys were already home. They watched as trees in their backyard bent and swayed, and the rain came down in sheets, pelting against the windows. It was a frightening sight, but Everett remained calm, knowing they would get through it together. When the power went out, they gathered in the basement, where the sound of the storm was deafening. As the storm raged outside, Everett held onto the boys, reassuring them that everything would be okay. The storm passed by morning, but the damage was clear. Shingles were scattered across the yard, and branches from the oak trees lay strewn about. Across the street, a neighbor's roof had partially caved in, and the sound of sirens filled the air as emergency vehicles made their way through the flooded streets. Everett knew that there would be work to do, and his first thought was to get the boys involved. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice steady. "There are people out there who need help." Without hesitation, Ethan and Adam followed Everett outside. They spent the next few days working tirelessly, helping their neighbors clear debris, patch up roofs, and distribute supplies. Everett couldn't have been prouder of the boys. Ethan, with his growing sense of responsibility, worked diligently, climbing ladders to help secure loose roofing and assisting others with repairs. Adam, who had once been shy and withdrawn, now had a new sense of purpose. His infectious energy helped lighten the mood for everyone, and he quickly became a favorite among the neighbors. He handed out bottles of water, carried supplies, and offered his helping hand wherever it was needed. The work they did wasn't just about repairing physical damage, it was about mending the spirit of the community. As the days passed, more people from town began to pitch in, working side by side with Everett and the boys. Neighbors who had once kept their distance were now collaborating with the family to rebuild. At the community potluck, held to thank the volunteers, the atmosphere was different. People who had once whispered behind Everett's back now stood beside him, sharing stories and laughing together. For the first time since the family had arrived, Everett felt like they were truly part of Springfield. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Adam looked up at Everett with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think Mom and Dad would have been proud of us?" he asked quietly. Everett's heart swelled as he looked at his sons. "I know they would have been," he said with conviction. "And I'm proud of you both, too." Caleb, ever the quiet one, glanced at Adam and then at Everett. "We're proud of you too," he said simply, and though the words were few, they carried the weight of love and gratitude. In the weeks that followed, the town's perception of Everett and his family continued to shift. The barriers that had once stood between them and the rest of Springfield had begun to crumble, replaced by genuine friendships and a sense of belonging. Everett had known that the road wouldn't be easy, but he never could have predicted the profound effect their hard work, kindness, and resilience would have on the community. The storm had brought more than just physical damage, it had sparked a transformation in the way the family was seen. The family, once outsiders, had become an integral part of the fabric of Springfield. With each act of kindness, with each new connection, Everett, Ethan, and Adam had not only rebuilt their lives but had helped mend the town itself. For the first time, Everett could see a future that was full of hope, belonging, and community. Together, they had found their place. As the seasons changed and the warmth of summer gave way to crisp fall air, Everett, Ethan, and Adam found themselves fully integrated into the rhythm of Springfield. What had once been an uncertain journey for all of them was now a path marked by purpose, belonging, and an unwavering sense of family. The transformation that had begun with the adoption papers had come full circle, not just in the lives of the three of them, but in the way the entire town had come to embrace them. The storm had been a pivotal moment, a true test of both their resolve and the town's willingness to open its arms to them. In the aftermath of the disaster, Everett, the boys, and their neighbors had worked together to rebuild more than just homes and property, they had rebuilt the very fabric of their community. In doing so, the walls of skepticism that had once kept them at a distance were starting to fall away. Ethan and Adam's involvement in the town's recovery efforts had solidified their place among their peers. Ethan's steady and focused demeanor made him an asset in everything from the basketball court to helping repair homes. His quiet strength had earned him the respect of even the harshest critics in town. But it wasn't just his skill that people admired, it was his heart, the way he cared for his little brother, Adam, and the way he had slowly opened up to Everett. They were all learning what it meant to truly be a family. Adam, once the more withdrawn of the two, had blossomed in the months since their arrival. The storm had changed him in ways Everett hadn't expected. His natural charisma and ability to connect with people had become evident as he worked alongside neighbors, brightening their spirits during the cleanup. He became a familiar face in town, running errands, offering help, and even organizing small community projects. Adam's infectious energy had drawn people in, and his charm had slowly won over even the most skeptical residents of Springfield. One afternoon, as the town gathered for its annual harvest festival, it was clear that things had changed. The festival, which had once felt like a distant event where Everett and his son stood on the sidelines, now felt like a celebration of their new life. The boys, their faces beaming with pride, had helped set up booths, organize games, and decorate the square. When the event started, people from all over town came together to celebrate not just the harvest, but the new spirit that had emerged in Springfield. As the evening wore on, Everett found himself standing beside the gazebo, watching Ethan and Adam engage with their friends. He could see how far they had come, how far they had all come. The boys had started to carve out lives for themselves in ways that Everett hadn't thought possible when they first arrived. Caleb, now fully integrated into his school and the basketball team, had begun making plans for college, while Adam had taken to volunteering at the local community center, helping with after-school programs and organizing events. The sense of belonging that they had so longed for was finally real. Later that evening, as the fireworks lit up the sky, Everett stood with the boys, their faces illuminated by the bursts of color overhead. Adam leaned against him, his head resting lightly on Everett's shoulder, while Ethan stood a few steps away, his hands in his pockets, gazing up at the sky with quiet contentment. It was a moment of peace, a moment where they could all pause and reflect on how far they had come from strangers in a small town to a family that had found its place. As the final firework exploded in a shower of gold and silver, Everett smiled, his heart swelling with pride. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like they had truly arrived. They were no longer just a family rebuilding from tragedy, they were an inseparable part of the community, a family that had been embraced, accepted, and loved. The future was theirs to shape, and Everett knew, no matter what, they would face it together. Years passed, and Springfield became a different place, not just because of new businesses or a renovated playground, but because of the lasting impact Everett, Ethan, and Adam had left on the community. What started as a quiet life in a modest house on the edge of town had transformed into a journey of growth, acceptance, and shared purpose. The once skeptical town had evolved into a close-knit family, united by the lessons of resilience, compassion, and the power of community. Ethan, now 20, was no longer the shy, reserved boy who had walked into Everett's life all those years ago. He had grown into a confident young man, studying architecture at the University of Kansas. On weekends, he often returned home to visit Everett and Adam, helping with community projects, and lending his knowledge to designs that would shape the town's future. His latest project, a mural depicting the storm and the recovery that followed, was not just an art piece, it was a tribute to the unity and strength the town had found in the aftermath of hardship. His work was a reminder to everyone that growth could come from even the most difficult circumstances, and that the bonds forged during times of crisis were the ones that would stand the test of time. Adam, 17, had taken a different path. With his natural charisma and his ability to connect with people, he had become a leader in the community. He worked at the local community center, leading youth outreach programs, offering mentorship to younger children, and organizing events that brought people from all walks of life together. Adam had a special gift. He knew how to bring people together, how to inspire them to do good, and how to show them that even the smallest acts of kindness could make a world of difference. His passion for helping others had earned him the respect of everyone in town, and his work was shaping the next generation of Springfield's leaders. One evening, during a dedication ceremony at the community center, the town gathered to honor the family that had changed everything. A plaque was unveiled, reading, "In honor of the Grant family, for teaching us what it means to be a community." The plaque was a simple acknowledgement of the love, effort, and dedication that Everett, Ethan, and Adam had poured into Springfield, but it spoke volumes. As the crowd clapped, Everett stood at the back, arms crossed, watching as Ethan and Adam spoke. Ethan talked about the importance of building spaces that brought people together, while Adam shared stories about the kids he had worked with and how a little kindness could change someone's life. Everett couldn't help but feel a swell of pride in his chest. They had come so far. As the ceremony ended, Everett found himself standing alone by the food tables, a quiet smile on his face. Caleb, now a young man with a deep sense of responsibility, walked over to him, his face thoughtful. "We couldn't have done any of this without you," Caleb said, his voice sincere. Everett shook his head, his eyes misty. "No, son," he replied. "You both made your own paths. I just gave you the tools." Later, as the evening wore on, Adam approached Everett, carrying 2 plates of pie. "I saved the last pieces for us," he grinned, handing Everett a plate. Everett chuckled, taking the plate. "Good to know some things don't change," he said, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life they had built together. The night was quiet, but filled with warmth as the family sat on a bench near the playground, eating their pie and enjoying the sounds of laughter and conversation around them. They had created a life filled with love, purpose, and community. Everett knew that this was just the beginning, that the future held even more for them, but for now, as he sat with his sons, surrounded by the people they had helped shape, he felt at peace. Through their journey, Everett, Ethan, and Adam had not just found a home, they had built a legacy that would endure for generations to come. The lessons of love, community, and resilience had been passed on, and Springfield would never be the same. Together, they had created something far more meaningful than a house on a gravel road. They had created a family, a home, and a community. The story of Everett, Ethan, and Adam teaches us that no matter the trials we face, the power of love, community, and resilience can help us overcome even the toughest challenges. Life is not about avoiding hardships, but about how we respond to them. Just like Everett, who opened his heart and home to 2 boys in need, we all have the ability to create change, not just in our lives but in the lives of those around us. The journey of this family shows us that when we embrace those who are different, work together, and stay committed to what's right, we can build a stronger, more compassionate community. It's a reminder that no matter where we are in life, we still have the power to make a positive impact, to heal wounds, and to leave a legacy of love and kindness. Whether it's helping our neighbors, supporting our families, or simply showing up for those who need us, we can all contribute to a brighter future. This is a lesson that transcends age. It's never too late to make a difference and to build the kind of life we want to leave behind. If you found Everett, Ethan, and Adam's story as heartwarming and inspiring as we did, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think a community can come together to overcome challenges like this? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about resilience, family, and the power of love. Stay tuned for more incredible tales that remind us all that it's never too late to make a difference. Your support means the world to us.